Um, yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now, anyway.
A classified 1995 dossier was suddenly and secretly delivered directly into the hands of King Charles in the dead of night by none other than Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's ex-husband. Irrefutable evidence exposed a bitter truth: the most powerful woman in the royal family had used insider intelligence as leverage for personal financial gain for years before officially ascending to the throne as queen consort. The moment the sordid truth came to light, King Charles immediately turned his back on her, handing full authority over the matter to Prince William. Carrying the agonizing memory of the ruthless isolation that had once claimed the life of his mother, Princess Diana William unleashed a thunderous strike, ordering an immediate freeze on all operational funds for the Queen's office, dismantling her trusted inner circle, and stripping away all of his stepmother's diplomatic engagements overnight. Is this William's righteous retribution to secure justice for Princess Diana, or the definitive end of Camilla's shadow reign? How will the master manipulator cope when stripped of money and dignity, confined under house arrest at a secluded country estate? And how will the British royal family conceal this brewing crisis from the watchful eyes of the entire world? Darkness cloaked the eastern underground passageway of the royal residence. The clock struck 11 at night, the hour when all official court circulars had closed and the night shift security officers had just completed the changing of the guard. At the auxiliary iron gate normally reserved for discreet deliveries, a loyal former equerry appeared. There was no entourage in sight, no vehicle bearing official royal insignia. The man stepping out of the dark-colored sedan was none other than Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's ex-husband, divorced since 1995. Clasping a worn, weathered leather briefcase tightly to his chest, Andrew hurried forward under the former equerry's guidance. They bypassed the grand entrance hall, where towering oil portraits gazed down from vaulted ceilings, and slipped up a narrow staircase leading straight to King Charles's private study. This nocturnal visit was entirely absent from the duty logs, with not a single dispatch permitted to reach the Queen's office. Inside the study, thick with the scent of aged oak and beeswax, King Charles sat in deep contemplation at his reading desk. As the heavy wooden door clicked shut, the room sank into a suffocating silence. Andrew dispensed with the customary elaborate court etiquette. He set the leather briefcase firmly onto the polished tabletop, flicked open the metal latch with a crisp, dry snap, and pulled out a thick dossier yellowed with age. Page after page was spread across the desk under the pale yellow glow of the lamp. They were copies of classified documents, internal financial memorandums dating back to the mid-1990s, a dark period stretching from the aftermath of the scandalous 1995 to 1996 divorces, right up until the eve of Camilla officially walking down the royal aisle in 2005. Every line of dot matrix print on the aging paper struck Charles like a direct blade to the eye. The dossier laid bare a raw, ruthless reality. During the very years Diana was struggling through solitary torment and crisis, Camilla had been quietly harvesting top-secret royal intelligence gathered through her clandestine affair with Charles. Sensitive intelligence regarding estates' land partitioning plans and confidential family settlements had been leveraged as outright blackmail tools in her private financial negotiations, securing vast windfalls and real estate properties registered solely in her name. Charles trembled as he turned each page. His eyes widened, his breath turning rapid and shallow. Transaction figures and Camilla's unmistakable handwritten signatures sat alongside offshore trust accounts. The woman for whom he had defied both family and public outrage for decades, the one he had believed to be his only true sanctuary, had entered the relationship built on cold base financial calculations. She had not come to him out of pure love as vowed. She had treated the crown's most vital secrets as bargaining chips to enrich herself behind his back. Standing opposite him, Andrew's face was as cold as ice. The former husband uttered no words of mockery, but his gaze radiated utter contempt for his ex-wife. Andrew pointed directly to the signature confirming a final fund transfer in the winter of 1996, where Camilla had traded the most intimate secrets of Charles's family for lifetime financial security of her own. A heavy leaden silence settled over the room. Charles sat frozen in his armchair, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the desk. The 1995 black dossier lay in plain sight, tearing through the gilded velvet curtain to reveal an indisputable sordid betrayal. That night, the shadow order that had dominated the palace for decades officially crumbled. Less than half an hour after Andrew Parker Bowles departed through the side exit, King Charles's heavy footsteps echoed down the deserted corridor leading to the West Wing home to Queen Camilla's opulent private quarters. With no footman knocking to announce his arrival, Charles personally flung open the double mahogany doors. Camilla was seated before her marble vanity, cradling a glass of red wine, her face still carrying the haughty poise of someone at the pinnacle of power and prestige. The sudden intrusion, and Charles's pale, furious countenance, made the faint smile on her lips freeze. Without a single word of preamble, Charles marched straight to the coffee table at the center of the room and slammed the entire 1995 dossier down onto the glass surface. Financial transaction statements and secret negotiation memos scattered wildly before Camilla's stunned eyes. The instant her eyes caught the bold lettering and familiar account numbers from the 1990s, Camilla's expression shifted from disbelief to sheer panic. The wine glass in her hand trembled so violently that crimson droplets spilled onto the hand-woven wool rug. Cornered by black and white indisputable proof, Camilla could not offer a denial. She knew all too well that the signatures and trust seals were authentic. Yet instead of confessing or showing remorse, the arrogant instincts of a seasoned manipulator immediately flared up. Camilla shot to her feet, her eyes flashing with venom, as she realized the source of the papers. Her voice tightened as she vehemently argued that the context had been maliciously twisted. She insisted at the top of her lungs that these were merely necessary self-defense measures for a woman cornered by the world following her 1995 divorce when her future hung entirely in the balance. Then, brimming with bitter fury, Camilla struck the table, demanding to know how Andrew could do something so cowardly to her, how her former husband could stab the woman who had shared his bed in the back. Charles stood towering over her, staring at the woman before him. He heard not a single apology, saw not a shred of regret for how she had peddled his family's honor and secrets to underground financial circles. All Camilla cared about was her indignation over her ex-husband's betrayal and her fury that her past money trap had been unmasked. Such brazenness struck like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing whatever blind affection remained in the king's heart. Charles did not even deign to reply. His gaze shifted from profound disillusionment to an icy, distant detachment. There was no shouting match, no soothing words or comforting gestures of the kind Camilla had grown accustomed to over 30 years. Charles resolutely turned his back and walked out. The cold thud of the wooden door closing was like the fall of a gavel, severing every bond between them. That very night, Charles summoned the keeper of the privy purse to his private chamber. An ironclad directive was issued immediately to launch a comprehensive merciless audit and review of all expenditures over the past 3 years within Queen Camilla's office. Every procurement invoice, every sponsorship flow, every private flight, and every disbursement made to her trusted entourage was to be completely unraveled. And the most devastating blow lay in the king's final order. This entire audit was to be placed under the direct command and oversight of the office of the Prince of Wales, Prince William. The ultimate power over Camilla's financial lifeline was officially handed to Diana's eldest son. 6 weeks passed since that fateful midnight confrontation, and the atmosphere inside the palace resembled a powder keg slowly drained of oxygen. In his private office at the Duchy of Cornwall, a financial domain entirely independent from the Crown's prince, William sat before a desk stacked with spending ledgers freshly delivered by the keeper of the privy purse. William studied every figure intently. Every penny Camilla had lavished on her network of aides, every lavish overseas tour, stood out in stark clarity. Yet what surfaced in William's mind was far more than cold arithmetic. It was the agonizing memory of the tears shed by his mother, Princess Diana. He vividly remembered childhood afternoons, watching his mother weep in the corner of a room isolated and crushed by the unyielding palace machinery, while that woman quietly manipulated the press and amassed wealth behind his father's back. The lesson about the cruelty of those who dwell in the shadows was etched into William's very bones. Now, wielding the sovereign authority of the Duchy of Cornwall and the absolute mandate of the king, he would not let history repeat itself. William required no drawn-out discussions, nor did he issue any warnings. With cold, decisive resolve, he personally signed an executive decree ordering a sweeping temporary suspension of all operations within Queen Camilla's household. The financial blow was devastating. The Queen's operational accounts were locked tight in an instant. All official allowances for domestic and international engagements were suspended indefinitely. Spending limits allocated for her personal aides, private communication staff, and inner-circle associates were frozen entirely. There would be no more automatic reimbursements, no more limitless corporate cards. William's directive made it unmistakably clear from that second onward, not a single penny would leave the coffers for Camilla's office without the explicit written approval of the Prince of Wales. With a single decisive stroke of the pen, William choked off Camilla's financial oxygen. He launched no verbal assault. He struck directly at the lifeblood sustaining his stepmother's apparatus of power. The one who had once traded in secrets to blackmail others was now stripped by the heir to the throne of every tool she had ever used to pull the strings of the royal court. On Monday morning, William's retribution transformed into a palpable nightmare, echoing through every corridor of the estate. The stately palace sank into an eerie, chilling silence. At 8 o'clock sharp, Camilla awoke to prepare for a demanding week of diplomatic engagements. But when she stepped into her anteroom, an unsettling sight greeted her: the silver salver bearing her morning mail official dispatches and daily papers, which had always been placed punctually on the tea table, lay abandoned outside the closed doors. No staff entered to pour tea. No deferential greetings echoed along the hall. When Camilla stormed over to her desk to inspect her diary, her private secretary walked in, ashen-faced. The Queen's entire official schedule for the upcoming month had been abruptly cancelled without explanation. Her planned royal tour of the northern counties, the lavish charity galas, all had been erased from the master royal calendar. The fleet of luxury motorcars, dedicated to her use, sat sealed inside the royal mews, grounded for lack of approved operational funds. The collapse spread like an oil slick. Her tight-knit team of aides and press officers, generously compensated over the years to plant glowing press coverage, received discreet reassignment notices banishing them to remote royal archive branches. Not one dared raise an objection, for every transfer order bore the personal seal of the Prince of Wales. Overnight, Camilla's bustling office of courtiers was hollowed out into a desolate, freezing void. The most ruthless psychological blow landed that afternoon. As the palace digital team updated the official royal website, millions of readers worldwide remained oblivious to a lethal symbolic shift. The biographies detailing Camilla's patronages and royal affiliations were quietly revised. Every verb defining her roles was shifted from present to past tense. From her standing as a reigning queen wielding sovereign clout, the official portals rendered her a figure of history, one who formerly patronized, previously served. Camilla was stripped of power in broad daylight, trapped within the palace's gilded walls, without the means to utter a single cry for help. Realizing the invisible noose was tightening around her neck as her accounts were sealed and her household was isolated, Camilla could no longer sit idle in her vacant rooms. Every attempt to see King Charles for protection was politely yet firmly deflected at the door by royal protection officers. Backed into a corner, she had no choice but to demand a face-to-face confrontation with the architect behind the punishment, Prince William. The meeting took place late one afternoon in a grand drawing room overlooking Buckingham Palace's barren winter gardens. All staff aides and personal protection officers from both sides were banished to the far end of the outer corridor. The The thick wooden doors were sealed shut. There was no negotiating table, no recording devices, and not a single slip of paper or note permitted inside. It was 20 minutes of raw confrontation between two people carrying a generational debt 3 decades in the making. Entering the room, Camilla clung to the lingering authority of a crowned consort. Leaning against a gilded console table, she went straight on the offensive with sharp, accusing tones, branding William an autocrat bent on tearing the family apart. She pointedly invoked her marriage to Charles, citing her decades of devotion to his father, to demand deference. Camilla claimed William was acting out of blind personal malice and warned that severing her royal prerogatives would ignite a scandal capable of shaking the very foundations of the throne. Faced with his stepmother's tirade and barrage of accusations, William remained motionless beside the towering floor-to-ceiling window. The slate-gray winter light cut across his tall, unyielding frame, and the hardened countenance of the Prince of Wales. With one hand resting casually in his trouser pocket, he stared silently at the bare trees outside, letting Camilla exhaust her justifications and threats. William's eerie silence rendered Camilla's outbursts hollow and desperately isolated within the cavernous room. Only when Camilla ran out of breath and began to gasp did William slowly turn around. He did not raise his voice, nor did he betray the slightest agitation. With measured, deliberate strides, he advanced toward the center table, closing the distance between them to less than a meter. Towering over his stepmother, William locked eyes with her faltering gaze, his expression as sharp as a razor's edge. The cold composure of the heir to the throne instantly snuffed out Camilla's feigned anger, replaced by a creeping wave of dread. In a low, steely voice that drove straight into her core, William spoke. He told her plainly that he knew every figure, every signature, and every sordid deal within the 1995 dossier Andrew Parker Bowles had delivered. He knew precisely how she had commodified royal secrets for personal enrichment during the family's darkest hours. Any excuses about circumstances or self-defense were utterly shameless in the face of the exposed truth. William's eyes bored into Camilla's bloodless face. Leaning in slightly, each word fell with the finality of a court sentence. He understood all too well the brutal price of silence within these palace walls. The toxic silence that had isolated, suffocated, and driven his mother, Princess Diana, into a corner years ago. That silence had harbored greed and betrayal behind these ornate walls for far too long. But that era was irrevocably over. William declared unequivocally that he would never, not for a single second, maintain that silence to shield anyone. The room plunged into a deathly stillness. William's words landed like a physical blow, shattering the last of Camilla's illusions. Standing before her was no longer the grieving orphan who had walked behind his mother's gun carriage in 1997, but a man armed with the sovereign authority of the king and the independent power of the Duchy of Cornwall, ready to purge without hesitation. Needing no further justification or argument, William glanced at his watch precisely at the 20th minute. He turned and walked straight toward the grand doors, no nod, no parting word. His footsteps faded down the hall, leaving Camilla standing alone by the window, sinking into dusk, completely shattered by the realization that her shadow empire had been crushed beneath the boots of Diana's son. William's steely vow beside the window was no empty bluff. Less than 48 hours after their suffocating face-off, the fissures concealed behind palace gates erupted into a media firestorm that shook Britain and reverberated across major American news outlets. The leak did not surface in cheap tabloid gossip columns. It struck the financial sections of London's most prestigious broadsheets. Splashed across front pages, investigative reports detailed the emergency freeze slapped on all Queen Camilla's operational accounts and allowances. Every revenue stream funding her lavish overseas travel, costly banquets, and private entourage was exposed as stripped of funding and placed under the direct control and authorization of Prince William's office. Murky expenditures came to light, triggering fierce public outrage and international scrutiny as illicit profit schemes dating back to the 1990s were pieced together. The palace found itself entirely powerless to douse the flames. Camilla's trusted communications team had already been scattered. There was no one left to spin narratives or generate smokescreens in the press. Wave after wave of public backlash slammed into Camilla's name, cementing her as the lightning rod for global condemnation. The climax of her fall unfolded 3 days later at a national memorial service broadcast live to hundreds of millions of viewers worldwide from Westminster Abbey. Inside the ancient abbey, hundreds of international dignitaries, senior statesmen, and foreign journalists packed the pews. Every camera lens and inquisitive gaze focused squarely on the central aisle leading to the royal family's front row seats of honor. King Charles entered in a dark suit, his countenance as cold and rigid as carved stone. Trailing closely behind was Camilla, clad in a somber black gown, with a veiled fascinator shrouding half her face. She tried to keep her spine straight, forcing a polite smile under the barrage of camera flashes, but her white-knuckled grip on her clutch and her hesitant steps betrayed profound inner devastation. The historic symbolic moment arrived the instant they reached the front pew. Instead of sitting close to his wife, as customary, King Charles deliberately adjusted his coat and shifted to the far edge of the pew. Between the king and Camilla sat an icy 18-inch void, a raw, unmistakable physical chasm laid bare before dozens of broadcast cameras. Throughout the 2-hour solemn service, Charles remained unmoving, his eyes fixed on the high altar. Not once did he turn his head. Not a single glance, not a brush of hands, not a whisper was exchanged, a stark departure from the public warmth they had displayed for decades. Beside them, Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat poised and dignified, their sharp, resolute gazes fixed ahead. William's commanding presence served as a quiet reminder that the era of tolerating deception had come to an absolute close. The 18-inch gap on the ancient oak pew became a wordless public verdict. Before millions of viewers watching the live broadcast, that distance declared unmistakably that the bond between the monarch and the ambitious consort had shattered. This public humiliation dismantled Camilla's last hope of saving face. As the final hymn concluded and the abbey bells began to chime, Camilla could no longer bear the weight of contemptuous glances and hushed whispers around her. Rather than accompanying the king to the main nave to greet guests, she bowed her head in haste, retreating early through a narrow side door of the abbey. But the indignity did not end there. Stepping onto the stone steps outside, Camilla was met not with a grand royal motorcade led by roaring outriders, but with silence. The ceremonial fleet had been eliminated. The only vehicle waiting was a lone black sedan, accompanied by just 2 protection officers assigned as minimum security. Camilla hurried inside, swiftly drawing the window blinds to shield herself from the flurry of flashes from press photographers thronging the security perimeter. The solitary car pulled away from the abbey gates in chilling silence, marking the utter ruin of a figure who had once manipulated the entire court, now cast out from the political stage in complete disgrace. Following the humiliating catastrophe at the National Memorial Service, the corridors of power in central London slammed shut behind Camilla forever. An unspoken purge, far harsher than any physical prison, was executed without mercy or exception. At 5 o'clock the following morning, while a thick blanket of fog still enveloped Buckingham Palace, the quiet expulsion began. No fanfare, no press corps, no escort of honor. A few unmarked black transport vans rolled into the rear courtyard. Wooden crates and luggage containing Camilla's personal wardrobe, jewelry, and private effects were briskly packed away by handlers. Housekeepers who once bowed deferentially every morning now maintained an aloof, icy distance. There were no farewells, no looks of sympathy. Everything proceeded swiftly and decisively, much like erasing the footprints of a traitor from the heart of the monarchy. Clad in a dark coat, with her head bowed low, Camilla stepped into the car and was whisked away from London before the capital could awake. Her destination was Ray Mill House, a secluded country estate nestled deep within the rural reaches of Wiltshire, completely detached from the dazzling lights and political pulse of the capital. As the rusted iron gates swung shut behind the lone sedan, Camilla understood that her days of soaring influence had reached an irreversible end. In this cold exile, The opulent illusion that had once surrounded her fell to pieces. Gone were the crystal-lit state banquets. Gone were the red carpet foreign tours. Every diplomatic engagement, high-level visit, and public event bearing the Queen's name was systematically struck from the court circular. The study that once bustled with politicians and influential backers was reduced to a bare wooden desk and the sound of winter wind whistling through window panes. Her inner network of aides, the potent apparatus that had helped her sway the media and consolidate connections over the years, was dismantled down to the last person. Private secretaries, PR handlers, and key advisors received reassignment notices or contract terminations within the week. The vast country house was left with merely 2 elderly domestic staff to prepare daily meals and a skeleton security detail at the gates. All internal channels of communication were cut, rendering the estate an entirely isolated island. The bitterest psychological toll was her total humiliating dependence for basic sustenance. While she retained the titular style of queen consort for public ceremonial decorum to shield King Charles's crown from scandal, Camilla had effectively lost all autonomy. The woman who had once lurked in the shadows using confidential files for extortion and financial bargaining now found herself in cruel irony. Every expense for daily groceries, hearth repairs, or estate maintenance had to be itemized on monthly requisition forms sent directly to the Duchy of Cornwall. There, Diana's eldest son, Prince William, held sole authority to scrutinize and approve every penny spent by his stepmother. Every financial string of Camilla's existence rested firmly in William's grasp. While Camilla languished in solitary obscurity in the countryside, a new era took shape in London. Standing on the balcony of Kensington Palace, looking out toward the Princess Diana Memorial, Prince William watched crowds of people strolling peacefully through the park. With resolute courage and iron determination, he had shattered the wall of deceit and toxic silence that had choked his mother's life for decades. The family's honor had been cleansed, justice for Diana had been fully restored, and the traitor had paid the ultimate price for unbridled greed to spend the remainder of her days in obscurity and solitude, under the watchful eye of the heir to the throne. Do you think stripping Camilla of her power and exiling her to the desolate countryside has truly brought justice for the pain Princess Diana endured in the past? If you were in William's shoes, holding that 1995 dossier in your hands, would you choose to remain silent for the sake of the crown, or take ruthless action to purge the betrayal? Share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. In a sea of videos, I am so glad YouTube managed to bring this one to you. We pour a tremendous amount of care into researching every single detail of these royal histories. I know using a TV remote takes a little extra time, but your like and subscription are the ultimate motivation for our team to keep creating careful, high-quality stories for your screen. Thank you so much for your support.